Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
23, the Chinese government released...
Hey guys, China map. Hi guys, my name's Connor. I like to learn things, and that's what we're doing right now. The original link from Johnny Harris, top of the description.
On August 28th, 2023,
What is China
the Chinese
doing?
government released a map. The map did a surprisingly good job at making a lot of other countries angry.
Several countries have rejected China's new standard map.
It's a violation of the law. So
Yo,
that's
this
where,
is freaking crazy. The line 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. But to claim all of that, am I wrong that like some of their justification for it was like it's the South China Sea? By that logic, the Sea of Japan is all Japan's. The Indian Ocean is now part of India, okay? Can't go through it, China, without India's permission. For like some historical reason, it's like, this is the same problem I have with the justification of a Jewish state created 1948, where it was like part of the justification was like for historical reasons. How is that? What? This? Okay.
Rejected China's new standard map.
it's a violation of the law. So that's where I put that map.
The release of this map also was met with a huge event and announcement within China. This featured the state media launching into a commentary on the importance of maps.
地图是国家版图最主要的表现形式。
Followed by a warning to the people that maps that have errors can cause, quote, great harm to society.
危害了我们祖国的这个统一。
So let's look at what's going on with this map, why countries around the region are condemning it, and why China had to go to such great lengths to tell people that there's nothing wrong with these maps, and that in fact, a map like this is key to national unity.
Question, guys. Is Chinese the hardest of like the... What do you call the languages in East Asia that use this sort of writing? But it seems like whenever I see Korean or Japanese, it doesn't look this complicated. Not important for the video, just
with these
sorry.
And why China had to go to such great lengths to tell people that there's nothing wrong with these maps, and that in fact, a map like this is key to national unity. To do this, I'm gonna need a high-res version of this map. Luckily, the Chinese government has me covered.
地图是国家版图最主要的表现形式。
发布了矢量地图，更好地满足专业用户。
If you guys hear banging in the background, there's construction going on. I can't help that.
I want to show you what this map says, and show you how China uses cartography to assert and project power in its region. Because as clean as this map looks, within it, there's actually a lot going on. Border tug-of-wars, fake islands, a 10th dash on a line in the ocean, barbed wire-wrapped clubs, and proxy wars. It's the perfect example of how maps aren't just maps. They're tools of national power.
The fake island thing, I gotta say, is like kind of smart. No, I'm no China fan. Okay, no one can accuse me of being like pro-China or whatever. But if maritime borders are, you know, everywhere around the world has been conquered. You know, I know Antarctica. It's like no one really agrees anyone owns it. But if it says that like you own the waters around an island of yours, and you find a leaf or atoll, and you build it up above sea level, and then you claim it, I mean that seems like you're taking advantage of a loophole there, and I mean that's kind of funny and kind of smart. I really don't know enough about this guy's
I don't like the feeling
learning.
of being spied on. And like all of us, I am spied on all of the time. Not just by governments, but by corporations, by people who want to make money off of my information. That brings me to this quick pause in our video to talk about our sponsor, Incogni. Incogni is a personal information removal service. I don't like the feeling of being spied on. I don't think any of us do. But
please use their links and promo codes, guys.
Spied on.
It's
Some
their
of us by
material.
governments, but almost all of us are spied on by corporations who collect our information, put it on these data broker lists, and sell it on an open market to people who want to make money off of us. Luckily, in many countries, including the United States, we have laws and rights to remove ourselves from these lists, but most of us don't know how to do it. It's a cumbersome bureaucratic process. And that brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Incogni, which is a personal information removal service. I've been using Incogni now for a few months, and it has changed my world. What you do is you sign up for Incogni, and you give them permission, and then they go through the process of requesting that you be taken off that list. And if anyone pushes back, like one of the corporations like makes it harder, Incogni follows through with the process to make sure that you get off of all of these lists. And then they update you month after month so that you can see the progress. You can see your privacy being reclaimed. The people who want this information aren't just marketers who want to sell you like new tennis shoes, but it's like people search sites, which are becoming a thing that use this data to like put you on these people search sites so people can find your information. Health insurance companies will sometimes buy some of this data so that they can use like your web browsing history to like jack up your health insurance bill. And perhaps most annoyingly, it's spam. I mean, my phone was constantly exploding with like random robocalls. I got all these phishing scams all of the time. Like my information was everywhere and it was blowing up my phone and my inbox. I mean, there's no end to the shenanigans that corporations will do to make money off of you and your information. No longer. Luckily, Incogni exists, and I am genuinely grateful for that. Unrelated to the fact that they're sponsoring today's video, which like I'm very grateful for that too. I'm just grateful that they exist because I don't like my information just being everywhere. So if you want to get in on Incogni at a discount, there's a link in my description. It's incogni.com/JohnnyHarris. When you click the link, it helps support the channel and it gets you 60% off their annual plan. The reason I have the annual plan is because even if you get taken off these lists, you'll
I didn't really trip, but I hit my knee.
Eventually make it back on, and having Incogni there to constantly monitor these lists and keep getting me off of them is of value to me. So the link's in the description. Use the code Johnny Harris. Thank you, Incogni, for sponsoring our journalism. And now it's time to dive into this mapping story about China and its very interesting new map. The government of China wants their country to look like this, but in reality, it looks a lot more like this. We're going to move left to right.
What is the red and yellow?
To Taiwan in the South China Sea. Oh, by the way, the Chinese government requires its map makers to use this algorithm that intentionally scrambles the latitude and longitude coordinates of their maps, all in the name of national security. This makes it hard for people like me to work with Chinese maps.
Kind of smart. Well, I feel like if any like international government is trying to look at you, I don't think they need your coordinates.
But we were able to hack through these maps and line them up with our own mapping systems, which is how we're able to make this video. Okay, with that, let's get started. First, we have Kashmir, a region that is already heavily disputed between India and Pakistan. The map shows that all of this section is a part of China, and indeed, China controls it. But India claims that this actually belongs to them. It's the source of tense conflict. Both countries are building stuff in this region. Roads, communication towers, airfields, everything to be ready in case a full-blown conflict breaks out. Troops from both sides face each other in a standoff at this line, the line of actual control. That's really what it's called. It loosely marks the border between these two massive countries.
So like we should use this as like the current border. Not to say it's the final one, but this is where the like India doesn't control this, China doesn't control this.
A border that was never really agreed upon. Because remember where we are here. We're in the Himalayas, the tallest mountains on Earth. Drawing lines and controlling territory here just doesn't work super well. But both sides want to exert control, even here in the high mountains, especially in these important trade regions.
I don't care how seemingly unimportant or isolated or just insane. I don't care, because you never know. Like I would never relinquish a piece of land just because it's like inhospitable, or it's like you never know what resources, materials, minerals, whatever will be useful and stuff in the future that could end up being found in that area. So I understand the importance of wanting to hang on to the things that some people might be like, well, why, you know?
These are two nuclear countries, and so they've agreed to not use firearms up here, no guns. So instead, when conflict breaks out, it looks more like a medieval battle, with barbed wire wrapped clubs and fence posts. The most recent clash was just in 2020, right here near Ladakh. 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese soldiers were killed.
Indian and Chinese soldiers fought on disputed land using stones and bamboo poles, and around 24 people died.
As you go down the
I'm kind of torn on this because I'm kind of happy that they agreed not to use guns, but then I'm like, so India and China and 2 nuclear powers. Like, imagine if the USA and Russia or USSR back in the day engaged, even if it's hand-to-hand combat, not guns, and killed each other. That'd be a big deal. So, are they like more mature than
the border between India and China? There are several more of these pockets of disputed land in the Himalayas. As we head east, we'll hit Nepal, and I have to mention that there was recently a leaked government report out of Nepal that asserts that China is encroaching into Nepal's sovereign territory, building stuff with no permission on Nepal's side of the border here in the Humla district. Nepal actually didn't want this report to come out. They have to walk a fine line being sandwiched between these 2 behemoth countries, and a big part of that means staying on China's good side. A few years ago, I was up here shooting an episode of Vox Borders, and the locals told me that the Chinese military didn't respect the border. They kind of did whatever they wanted, which is why I wasn't even allowed to get up to the border fence between these 2 countries.
Yeah, it's one thing to be, you know, afraid of China, that you don't want to, you want to give a little concession and be like, okay, just don't hurt us too much. But soon you're going to realize that your whole country is gone. And so, yeah, I'm pausing too much.
It's an eerie feeling, being so close to a country that is so serious about projecting its power to its neighbors. Anyway, let's keep going east, where we'll hit another landlocked country in the Himalayas.
How
Bhutan.
thin the Indian border is.
The border here continues to make an effort to divide these countries in a rugged, glacier-filled expanse. Back in 2006, China quietly pressured Bhutan to give them this big chunk of mountain territory, and Bhutan conceded. They didn't really have a choice. And so while they kind of keep it hush-hush, China is reminding the world that they actually control this part of Bhutan. It's theirs now. China's using the same playbook in different parts of Bhutan, blurring this northern border as they encroach south. In 2020, China claimed that they actually own this part of Bhutan, a forested nature sanctuary. But strangely, this official map doesn't show that this area is inside of China's borders. Maybe it will next year. The most strategically important part of China's claim on Bhutan is here. This little strip of land gives us a better idea of why China is squeezing the border of this tiny country. If you zoom out, you'll see where we are. Right here at this vital choke point between these 2 rivals, India and China. This thin corridor where India connects to its eastern states. Some call this the chicken neck. The map asserts that China owns this part of Bhutan, the Doklam Plateau.
By the way, China owns this part of Bhutan, the Doklam Plateau. I know where I'm at, but I always wondered, I'm like, why does India have this thin little corridor over here? And my best guess is when the partition of India happened after, British colonial rule dropping, India becoming independent, and they separated it between Hindu majority and Muslim majority populations, hence Muslim majority Bangladesh, Muslim majority Pakistan. And so my assumption is why they gave India this little turkey neck is that there were probably a lot of Hindu people within this area that they just needed to connect to major India, and so gave them that.
Which provides them a perfect military vantage point over the chicken neck, India's critical corridor. This would make India vulnerable in the case of an active conflict. Oh, Oh, and their claim is not just on the map. Satellite imagery analyzed by Reuters shows that China is building roads and settlements and structures on this sovereign territory of Bhutan, enhancing their strategic military position and fortifying their claim on the map.
Smart, I guess.
These border shenanigans in Bhutan are considered a proxy for tension between China and India. Bhutan, like Nepal, is just sandwiched in the middle.
Satellite images of the Chinese incursions in Bhutan, where China has built roads and barracks on the undisputed territory of Bhutan.
Okay, let's keep moving on.
Can I say
Next to
something, guys,
Bhutan-
that's really awkward for me? Is that, like, as an American, which I am, it's strange to tell countries that are developing to not do things that we did in the past on much greater, more ruthless scale. I am not pro-China, okay? I don't like China. So you can't call me this, okay? But it sounds so weird for me to tell another country to not do stuff that we did to become powerful. Like, we pushed Native Americans back and back and back, and they couldn't do anything, and they had to make concession after concession. And then when you tell countries, forget China, but any country that has, you know, natural resources, forests that they want to cut down to make more things, and then you have countries that built their wealth and power on doing the same things that these developing countries are doing, to then say, hey, you're hurting the environment, you can't do that. It's like, wait, so you, who already did all this, but in a time when no one cared, is telling me that I can't do the same things to make myself powerful that you did. I can't help that feeling. And so what China's doing is invading, but it's like, are borders just objectively correct? Especially places like India, the places in Africa that were drawn by European rulers. It's just weird. I don't want conflict. I want to call it out when it's being pushed on countries like China's doing. But I can't help this guttural, like, wait, didn't we do all that? And it's
Chinese incursions in Bhutan, where China has built roads and barracks on the undisputed territory of Bhutan.
Okay, let's keep moving on. Next to Bhutan, China's map shows that all of this land are within its borders. They now call it South Tibet, but all of this territory belongs to India. It's full of Indian citizens. India's claim to this land relies on this 890-kilometer borderline that a British representative drew in 1913 in partnership with a representative from Tibet who agreed to the line. But China says this isn't legitimate. They own Tibet now, and they never authorized this line dividing Tibet from India. So on their map, they assert that all of this belongs to China. And to take it a step further, they're actually renaming stuff on their maps in this region, from mountain peaks to rivers and cities, showing us how China wants to claim and standardize every corner of its country, exerting control and influence even in these remote places. Now, India is not standing by and letting this happen. To counter this, the Indian government is
India is such a wild card, kind of like France. I don't trust France, okay? Guys in the EU, France is a Trojan horse. Watch out. I love France, but I'm just like, they're so forget that. I'm joking there. All right, anyone from France, I love you.
$500 million standing by and letting this happen.
But India is like, they're not pro-China and Russia. They're not pro-West exactly. They're just kind of like, they're India. And they can be because they're the most populous country.
To counter this, the Indian government is spending $500 million to build roads and develop hundreds of villages with the goal of solidifying their claim to this land. As we head east, let me mention that during the pandemic, China has been building a fence along this border with Myanmar, mostly to keep people and illicit goods out of China. This border has always been porous. People who share culture and language would cross back and forth, informally trading, but this fence has totally changed that, and people are angry. I've considered doing an entire video on this border fence and how it's disturbing and affecting life here. If that's
Burma and Myanmar are the same thing, right?
interesting to you, please let me know in the comments. So while this isn't a disputed territory, it is another example of China's increased effort to tighten its control on every corner of its land. Okay, now we've arrived to the ocean, the part of the map that gets a little wild. The government map actually makes it look...
That's like America saying all of the Caribbean Sea, that's mine.
simple. All of the water inside of this dashed line is China's, but the reality actually looks like this. This is what's known as the 9-dash line, and it was effectively a hand-drawn boundary by the Chinese government in the 1940s. It's not a precise border, it wasn't agreed upon by the countries here, and nor is it legal, at least according to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, who calls the 9-dash line lawless, because it clearly cuts through the waters that international law says belong to these neighboring countries, and that's how you get this jumble of all these lines.
I mean, Vietnam is being pretty aggressive too. Like, just... I forget what the rules are. I guess they're all being pretty,
But, as superpowers do, China ignores all of this because they can. And they continue to operate as if this entire ocean, which by the way is replete with fish and fossil fuels, as well as militarily strategic islands and important trade routes, all of it is theirs. This has created active conflicts with neighboring countries because for China, these aren't just lines on a map. China has been pumping sand onto tiny reefs to create islands where there were none. Then they
snorted. I'm sorry, this is kind of like, is this against code? Like, is there anything in international law that says you can't build up land and then claim it?
Build a military outpost on these newly created islands. In the last decade, they've built dozens of these outposts throughout the South China Sea, and you can see that these militarized islands are right inside the waters that the world has agreed belong to these other countries. The Chinese Navy also steps in, patrolling these waters and routinely harassing fishermen from other countries, reminding them that China isn't subject to the rules. This is their water, just like their official map says.
The United States is accusing China of harassment.
A Filipino fisherman was chased by Chinese Coast Guard speedboats as he made a dash for the shallow waters of Scarborough Shoal last Friday.
A similar dispute is happening on a group of islands a little north of here, where Japan, China, and Taiwan all claim these islands that are surrounded by oil and gas fields. China will often flex on Japan by sending Coast Guard ships into the water.
By the way, guys, I just want to say this. America can be a bully too, okay? So I don't want to come across as that guy is like, oh, America's perfect. But this is
of here, where Japan, China, and Taiwan all claim these islands that are surrounded by oil and gas fields. China will often flex on Japan by sending Coast Guard ships into the water and airspace around these islands. This is their neighborhood. They think these islands are theirs, and
stop with the World War, guys, okay? Stop with the World War II restrictions on Germany and Japan. They are no longer imperial and NAZI will not be mentioned party, okay? So the still wanting to limit these countries because of stuff they did in World War II is actively hurting our chances of containing a future threat. Japan is super strong economy, very capable, and they need to have any military restrictions left from World War II to be eliminated, in my opinion.
They're going to assert that claim on the map as well as in real life. On China's map, Taiwan is included as a part of China. Even though Taiwan has been independent for decades, China insists...
Like, America says Taiwan is part of China, and yet Taiwan says it doesn't want to be part of China, and yet the USA says it will defend Taiwan. It's just a mess.
That this is theirs. And if push comes to shove, they've made it very clear that they are willing to claim it back by force. And to that end, this new map includes an addition to the 9-dash line, a 10th dash, a line that drifts dangerously north to encircle the water east of Taiwan. This isn't the first time that a 10th dash has appeared on a Chinese government map, but it is a meaningful moment for the government to just slip in another dash. And it's created a big debate about what this actually means. But one thing that almost all experts agree on is that China's ability to just switch up their ocean claim by adding another dash communicates the original message of using a hand-drawn line as your maritime claim, which is that China feels historically entitled to this region, to this ocean, and they will behave how they choose in their own neighborhood, especially at a time when its neighbors are partnering with its geopolitical rival, the United States, to surround and encircle China with a large military buildup in the region.
That's what China, I don't think really, like, I don't think China is stupid. And so making an enemy with everyone except North Korea, but South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, I don't know about Singapore, and I don't know about Thailand and Cambodia, but Vietnam, Malaysia, like Myanmar, India, you're already not great with. It's like, I have a big conclusion I want to make. I'm just going to wait till it's for sure over.
The last one I'll mention is a tiny one that's kind of surprising. It's up here where the map claims this river island that should belong to Russia. There was a dispute about this, but 20 years ago, Russia and China agreed to redraw the border like this, giving half of this island back to Russia. But in this map, they claim it once again, and no one is totally sure why. So this new map out of China is a series of political statements, which arguably every map is. Some of these are worthy of debate, some are wishful thinking, and some are downright aggressive. But one thing is clear, China is now rich and powerful, and motivated to exert its geopolitical vision in the world. It's a reminder that maps have always been a tool for
guys.
Great.
No. This is where I want to say my final thing, and I'll connect because it's connected to this.
But one thing is clear: China is now rich and powerful.
This is the thing that I want to, like. It's a thought that's coming out of my brain, okay? But it's like, why are the borders on world maps considered to be the borders forever, or like the objective borders? Because as I see it, the way I see it is there is no such thing as an objective border. It's just subjective. It's what can you conquer? What can you hold on to? What can you hold on to long enough to subjugate and then be accepted by other nations and recognized? And that's the name of the game, and that's been the name of the game for human history. Am I wrong? So as much as I do think this is ridiculous, they're doing nothing new. They're saying, "Hey, I'm becoming more powerful." The maps, the borders, a lot of the borders today were drawn by Europeans when they were very unfair, to put it lightly. And they think they're strong enough to increase their borders, and if they can do so, hold on to it, conquer it, subjugate it, then how is that different than how most every other country got its borders? It's easy China's already huge, okay? China, Russia, Brazil, Australia, India, you could say, Canada, US, have giant borders with enormous amounts of resources. But a lot of these the borders were created in a time when stuff wasn't very fair, and now we want to play fair. But if you got the borders through unfair ways and want to play fair in keeping them, that's an issue. And so, do I see anything wrong with what China is doing in comparison to history? No, this makes you're strong enough, you get it. I think it's overambitious. But if anything I can get answered from you guys is, are borders not just completely made up, and it's what you conquer that matters? It's ruthless, but it's how did America get its land? How did Canada? How did Russia? How did China? All by ruthless subjugation with vastly superior force. And as ridiculous as this seems, especially the 9-dash line and the South China Sea claims, And you have to live in a world where you will deal with the consequences of other countries if you try to claim this. But at the same time, this seems normal through history. Maybe not normal for the past since World War II, but if you understand what I'm saying, I really appreciate any comments.
And
there.
motivated to exert its geopolitical vision in the world. It's a reminder that maps have always been a tool for great powers to express their aspirations. And this map, in this modern day, is no different.
Great video. Again, I'm not a fan of China. I don't like China. I don't like how they run their country, but I'm not Chinese. I don't want to tell any country how to run their country. But when it comes to international claims, you have to deal with repercussions. If you're strong, you can get away with more. And if China thinks they're getting stronger and they're making this move, this is par for the course in history. If they lose, they lose. They'll be punished. If they win, they win. They'll take control and get something good. I just think that is we somehow think that we're at like the end of history, and the borders are the borders. I'm cool with that. I'm from America. We have giant borders. But if I'm a smaller country or a developing country into a power and they want to expand, it seems hypocritical to say, no, you can't because it's immoral. Whereas it's better if you say, no, you can't because we'll stop you. That's another thing. Thank you guys. I burped. I'm sorry. Love you all. Hope any questions I asked, if you could answer them, any comments at all, really appreciate it. Hope you guys are all doing well. I'll see you next video. Bye, guys.